Welcome to the show, Our Democracy The CJR Show. In this show, we will discuss questions of democracy, governance, elections, and other topical issues in Guyana and occurrences in countries around the world. We hope the show will be of interest to everyone. So let's begin the show. Good day. Welcome to another in the series Our Democracy, the CJR Show. Today is Wednesday, May 28, 2025. In today's show, I will share with you two important topics. One, treated with political developments in Guyana. The other, I will focus on the recent elections held in neighboring Surinam. So let's begin. President Irfan Ali had delivered a political masterstroke. He has called for elections to be held on September 1st, 2025. In effect, his announcement dealt a serious knockout, non-recovery blow to the political opposition, who are unprepared in many respects for a September 1st, 2025 election. In other words, they were caught with their pants down. Soon after the president's announcement, Bar Jagdeo, General Secretary of the ruling PPPC, issued a public statement welcoming and supporting the announcement declaring that the PPPC is ready to begin the campaign to win another term in office. The announcement of an election date comes at a time when the political opposition is in a state of total disarray, when they are at their weakest point ever and with daggers drawn and held at each other's throats. Political opportunism, personal ambition, and untrammeled egoism has so consumed the current leaders of the political opposition that rather than treating with real, not imaginary challenges facing the nation, they have been horsing around, sharing out ministerial portfolios as if in government. No doubt, they have all been afflicted with what I describe as red carpet fever. Sensing the maturity of the political situation in the country as one that is ripe for the further and uninterrupted advancement of the positive social and economic conditions obtaining in the country, the government and ruling party assess that the time is now for elections 2025 to be held. The announcement of the election date should be viewed as neither a distraction from topical social and economic political issues that have surfaced within recent times in our country, nor should it be viewed as opportunistic in the sense that government sought and found something to cling to as a matter of political survival. The fact of the matter is, as I see it, certain key objective and subjective factors have either matured or already exist in the country, thus creating fertile ground for the president to announce a date for elections to be held. These factors would have included, among others, disarray among the political opposition parties, inability among the parties to form an electoral alliance, strong personal ambitions and backstabbing among the leaders of the political opposition, calls by the political opposition for electoral reforms that were either self-serving or meant to derail the electoral process, unfounded claims by the political opposition that GCOM is unprepared and incapable of holding a free and fair election, harping on race and discrimination that have no relevance whatsoever to the political realities in Guyana. But most importantly, and above all, the call should be seen as a means of delivering another powerful rebuff, this time by way of a strong mandate from the Guyanese electorate to push back against the existential threat from Venezuela and Maduro's pretense at holding a farcical election in the Essequibo, which is an integral and indivisible part of Guyana's national territory. But another important but critical factor that Guyana's leadership must have taken into consideration is the mood of the Guyanese electorate. This mood, in my view, is characterized by a strong sense of optimism, a renewed conviction of civic duty, as well as the strong enthusiasm of the Guyanese people towards the current developmental trajectory now under the PPPC administration. The increasing availability of more and more public health and education facilities across the country and other personal uplifting opportunities placed by the government at the disposal of the Guyanese people, beginning from 2020 up to the present point in time. These measures cumulatively and for all intents and purposes should be seen as a continuation of the socioeconomic policies of previous PPPC administration that had a strong societal impact, resulting in uplifting the living standards and the well-being of the Guyanese people. While the pessimists, critics, and cynics in our midst will obviously claim that the election should be viewed as a referendum on government performance and as an opportunity to pass judgment on the president, his cabinet, and other senior government officials such as permanent secretaries, I suggest that we first characterize their claims as noise, and secondly, as an attempt to play on the minds of the electorate. However, their efforts must be viewed as nothing more than the expression of a bad-minded bunch of political malcontents who seek relevance and succor by exploiting topically emotive issues, including race, as a means of finding space and oxygen for themselves within our democracy. In the meantime, all Guyanese who recognize and embrace the importance and the vital need of uninterrupted peace, progress, and prosperity under the PPPC should continue to maintain a high degree of optimism and level-headedness throughout the entire campaign up to election day, when our conscience always should be our guide. I now move to the next topic, which has to do with elections in Suriname. On May 25, 2025, elections were held in neighboring Suriname. 14 political parties contested the elections, held in all 10 districts of Suriname. The candidates from the two main parties were Chandrika Prasad Santoki of the ruling Progressive Reform Party, known as the VHP, who won the 2020 election. The Progressive Reform Party, VHP, an Indo-Surinamese party, was founded in 1947 by Jagannath Lachman, a Surinamese politician who served as president of his party until his death in 2001. The other main party in Suriname is the National Democratic Party, or the NDP, led by Jennifer Gailing Simons. The party was founded in 1987 by Daisy Boutarge and is one of the first parties in the country to have a stable base of support across different ethnic groups. Other contesting parties were the National Party of Suriname, the NPS, the General Liberation and Development Party, the ABOP, the Arena Political Party, the APPP, the Party for Communication, known as the PVC, the OPTSU, the Alternative 2020 A20, and the Pertajaha Lahore PL. There's also the People's Party, known as the Leaf Bar VLS, the New Liu DNL, the Brotherhood and Unity Party in politics, the BEP, and the Democratic Union of Suriname, known as the DUS. And finally, there's a Democratic Alternative, known as Alternative 91. Massive billboards displaying the faces of leading party candidates with their corresponding numbers on the ballot paper were mounted all over Paramaribo, while flags bearing the colors of the contesting political parties were visible at every nook and cranny in the city. Under Suriname's PR electoral system, a political party can name candidates to contest in each of the 10 electoral districts against candidates of other political parties, all of whom hope of garnering as much votes as possible to win in that electoral district. Depending on who gets the most votes because of their membership to his or her party, that person may contest internally for the position of president of the country at the next sitting of the Surinamese National Assembly, since it is the parliament that elects the president of the republic. However, should the National Assembly end up as what I described as a hung assembly, meaning an assembly that cannot make a decision, then the district representatives, who were also elected at the just concluded elections, incidentally by law, each elector is allowed to vote twice, but on two separate ballot papers, one for the party to send a representative to the National Assembly, and secondly, another to serve as a district representative. It is the latter who will be called upon in the case of a hung assembly, meaning the assembly cannot resolve the matter, to elect a president along with 51 members of the National Assembly. With a change in the Surinamese electoral system, this year's election was held under the PR, or proportional representation system, as in the case of Guyana. Previously, general elections in Suriname were conducted using the 10 constituency electoral arrangements, more or less akin to the constituency electoral system as obtained in other CARICOM member states. In 2022, the Constitutional Court of Suriname held that the constituency system was outdated and unconstitutional, citing unequal voting power among districts. As a result of that ruling, all 51 seats in the National Assembly were up for election from the whole of Suriname, that is now one constituency. In the circumstances, electors in the just concluded elections cast their ballot for party lists, not individual candidates. Seats in the National Assembly are allocated to parties in proportion to the total number of votes they receive nationwide. The new electoral system was officially approved by the National Assembly of Suriname in October of 2023. Up to the time of making this podcast, the following seats have been allocated as follows. The Progressive Reform Party, the VHP, 17 seats. The National Democratic Party, NDP, 18 seats. The National Liberation and Development Party, ABOP, 6 seats. The National Party of Suriname, NPS, 6 seats. The Parjaha Lahore, PL Party, 2 seats. Alternative 2020, or A20, 1 seat. And the Brotherhood and Unity Party, BEP, 1 seat. According to the Suriname Constitution, 26 seats are needed to govern the country. According to reports, a coalition government, which is something normal in Suriname, based on deal making began long before the May 2025 elections. Now together they have 34 seats. A six-party coalition among the parties that won seats has been established, completely leaving out the Indo-Surinamese party or the Indo-Surinamese, who constitute 27.4% of the total population, making them the largest ethnic group in Suriname. Any political and/or social scientist would view this as an interesting development that should be noted for obvious reasons. Some of the parties in the new coalition under the leadership of the NDP were in Santoki's government in the first year of his administration, but owing to differences on policy matters, claims of unacceptable personality traits, allegations of corruption and drug trafficking against holders of public office, many left and eventually gravitated towards the NDP. Credit should be given to the persuasive and negotiating skills of the leader of the NDP, Guyana'S, who brought the disillusioned and erstwhile supporters of the VHP over to the welcoming arms of our party, the NDP. Guyana'S is likely to be the first woman president of Suriname. On the economic front, Suriname entered into a 36-month International Monetary Fund IMF extended fund facility that was approved by the IMF Executive Board in December 2021. According to a report by an IMF team who held discussions with the Surinamese authorities during February 2025, agreement was reached on what was described as, quote, a staff-level agreement on the ninth and final review of the authority's economic recovery program, supported by the Extended Fund Facility, EFF. The review is subject to approval by the IMF Executive Board. Subject to approval by that board, Suriname would have access to about US $61.3 million or SDR, that is the Surinamese currency, 46.8 million. According to the IMF, the Santoki administration faced a number of challenges during its term in office, including the following: underperformance of non-tax revenues and overspending on electricity subsidies, as well as support for rice farmers that lost their crops due to drought. These challenges notwithstanding, the VHP, according to the IMF, quote, achieved the broad objectives of the program, end of quote. The IMF funded Economic Recovery Program, ERP, and some of us are familiar with that under the Hart administration. And that program for Suriname was implemented by the Santoki administration and was aimed at, one, debt restructuring, consequential austerity measures, tenders for high-profile infrastructure projects that were riddled with allegations of corruption, all of which helped to weaken his party's popularity in the country. The challenges notwithstanding, the IMF stated that, quote, economic growth is projected to reach 3% this year, 2025. Inflation is on a steady downward trend. Donor support is increasing. Investor confidence is returning. International reserves are stable. Public health is declining. Public debt, is declining. The autonomy and governance of the central bank has been strengthened and now at comfortable levels. According to the IMF, quote, spreads have declined to the lowest levels on record, highlighting the progress made toward restoring market access. Furthermore, the fund pointed out that, quote, the authorities' main near-term policy priority is to maintain fiscal discipline in the run-up to the elections while protecting the vulnerable, end of quote. The incoming NDP administration will have to decide on the future of its relation with the IMF, considering the observations made by the IMF, among others, that, quote, the authorities face important near-term risks, including capacity constraints and policy implementation challenges, reflecting the increasingly difficult social, political environment, end of quote. Furthermore, the incoming NDP coalition administration will have to consider the IMF's observation that, and I quote, stronger efforts are needed to address the challenges in the execution of the social beneficiary programs to ensure that the benefits reach the intended beneficiaries, particularly in the country's interior regions, end of quote. Among the key measures recommended by the IMF that the new government will have to take on board are that the Surinamese authority should promptly implement the recently completed strategic plan to enhance the effectiveness of social protection with the support of development partners, and that the authorities need to push ahead with the ambitious structural reform agenda to strengthen institutions and governance with the support of the IMF. The fund commended the outgoing Santokhi administration for making, quote, important steps towards amending the anti-corruption legal framework to strengthen the income and asset provisions for politically exposed persons, end of quote. Again, the incoming coalition government will now have to take note of the fund's recommendation that, quote, the amendment should be promptly enacted and implemented, and that, quote, transparency of public officials' assets holdings would lessen the vulnerability to corruption that comes with the massive oil revenues, end of quote. In addition, the IMF observed, and I quote, it is also very important to work towards getting the suspension lifted from the extractive industries transparency initiative, end of quote. Also, the incoming coalition administration will have to take note of the following IMF recommendation. That is, that the recent approval by the National Assembly of amended public financial management law incorporating a fiscal rule and savings and stabilization fund law are good steps towards strengthening the fiscal and institutional frameworks to enable the country efficiently and transparently to manage the upcoming oil revenues. Nevertheless, the fund suggested that broader structural reforms are necessary to increase efficiency, transparency, and accountability in the energy sector, end of quote. Now I want to say this, unless skillfully managed, more IMF-driven structural reforms are likely to cause some unease among the Surinamese populace. In the final analysis, the VHP paid the price for swallowing the bitter medicine of IMF's economic recovery programs. This was reflected in the formation of the seven-party anti-VFP alliance. The electoral setbacks notwithstanding, the outgoing VHP administration should be commended for leaving behind a healthy economy, since according to the IMF mission, Surinam's medium-term outlook has improved significantly with the announcement of the final investment decision, paving the way for offshore oil production beginning in 2028. The economic and fiscal considerations aside, it seems to me that there's a much larger geostrategic question here. And this has to do with what some view as the democratic wave now sweeping across CARICOM. That is beginning with the coming to power of the UNC in Trinidad and Tobago, the unexpected return to office of the NDP in Surinam, and the likely re-election of the PPPC to government in Guyana. The coalition anti-VHP forces in Surinam has reinforced the democratic electoral wave, which has emerged and existed for a short while in CARICOM, beginning with the victory of Kamala Bisesar in Trinidad and Tobago, A. Fanali in Guyana, and Chandrika Prasad Santoki in Surinam. Had the VHP been re-elected in Surinam, and with an imminent victory of the PPPC in Guyana as a result of free and fair elections in 3 CARICOM member states, the democratic wave would be further consolidated. This has brought me to the end of today's program. I do hope you have benefited from what I had to say on these 2 issues. I look forward to meeting with you once again on May 31st, 2025 at 5 p.m. Please be advised that I will not be doing my podcast on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. I will now do so at 3:30 p.m. every Wednesday. Podcasts, however, will continue as usual on Saturdays at 5 p.m. Please accept my apologies for any inconvenience caused. Please do not forget to press the like and share buttons and subscribe to the CJR Show. I welcome and encourage you to share your views with me on the 2 topics I discussed with you today. 1, political developments in Guyana, and 2, the results of the recent elections in Suriname, or on any other topic you may have in mind. Thank you and goodbye.